Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Be Like Christ. I have a bit of a different video to make today. I felt compelled to make this video after receiving the same criticism yet again on a YouTube video. And this is not just a criticism that I received, but it's one that's very popular. And that's what I want to talk about today, is this particular criticism of Christianity. This is a criticism that critics use to try to suggest that Christians are inconsistent in the way that they apply the Bible, that they want to apply certain commands of God, but then other commands of God they just kind of disregard because they don't like them. And this is very popular. I most often see it when, let's say, I'm talking about how God condemns the LGBTQ lifestyle from like Romans chapter 1, for example. Somebody will point out some verses in the Old Testament to me and suggest that I'm inconsistent, that I only want to apply certain verses. This is very popular not only on my videos, but in just, if you ever listen to Christian critics, this will come up somewhere. And it's so popular actually that a past president used this when criticizing the idea that Christian values and that the scriptures can be used in creating laws for a nation. I won't mention any names, but it was Barack Obama before he became president, back when he was a senator. So it was so popular that even he caught wind of it and thought that he was going to be really clever and use it. So the criticism goes something like this. Here's a common example that I get. So let's say I make a video suggesting that God condemns the LGBTQ lifestyle based on a verse like Romans chapter 1. Somebody will inevitably end up in my comments and say, "You Christians, you're so inconsistent. Haven't you ever read the book of Leviticus?" Because in the book of Leviticus, there are commands from God to his people commanding them that they are not allowed to eat shellfish or to wear clothing made out of mixed materials. Christian, I know that you probably just went to church a couple times. You probably never read the book of Leviticus, and so I got you. I caught you. You're inconsistent, and you can't answer this because you don't have a problem. You don't condemn people who eat shellfish, but you want to condemn the homosexual. So you're inconsistent, and they really feel like this is a big knockdown moment, like caught you in your hypocrisy moment, and that's why it gets used so often, because there actually are a lot of Christians who don't have a good answer to this. And so it has probably worked on a few people in the past. So let's talk about this for a little bit. And let's ask, are Christians actually inconsistent because they apply commands in the New Testament, but they don't apply commands in the Old Testament, like in the book of Leviticus, for example? Now, this argument, this criticism is actually very easy to answer. It does not require mental gymnastics. It requires common sense to answer. The reason that it works is because there's widespread illiteracy of the Bible among critics and among Christians. And so a lot of people don't have an answer when somebody brings it up. And it's just an easy argument to make for somebody who wants to criticize Christianity. So let's break this down. It won't take very long. How do you answer this criticism? Are Christians inconsistent? The short answer is no. Now, let me explain why. Okay, so let's say that you pick up a novel and you find a quote from that novel. In order to understand that quote, what do you need to understand about the novel? Well, you probably need to understand the general storyline, what was going on in that particular chapter, who said the quote, who was actually being quoted, and to whom they were speaking. You might need to know some of the other surrounding details to be filled in on how to interpret that quote properly, right? And I say all that just to say context is important. We interpret pretty much everything in our life, but especially books, based on context, and the surrounding information fills us in on what's going on. Now, how do we interpret the Bible? How do we understand, and how do we know what applies to us and what doesn't apply to us? Well, it's not really that complicated. It's context, just like we use in every other part of our life. Okay, so what we need to understand is the context in which the commands appear. lo and behold, come to find out that if you actually read the Bible in context, you actually understand the story that's going on in the Old Testament, specifically in the first 5 books of the Bible, what you'll come to understand is that the laws that appear in much of those books, and specifically these laws that we're talking about not eating shellfish and wearing mixed materials, that these laws were not given to all people, and they were not intended to be followed for all time. In fact, they were given to a very specific people, and they were only supposed to be followed for a specific period of time. Now, who were those specific people? They were God's chosen people. That's not Christians, because this is before Christ came to the earth. These are the Israelites, right, who would eventually become, the Jewish people during Jesus's day. We know them as, but these were the Israelites. These were the descendants of Abraham. God specifically chose Abraham to bless his family and to work through his family. And so out of Abraham, the Israelite nation grew, and God gave them a specific set of laws to make them unique from the other nations. And some of the laws that they received were these laws about shellfish and restrictions on what their clothes were supposed to be made of. These laws were not intended for the Assyrians. They were not intended for the Aztecs. They were not intended for any other people group throughout history. The people in the Greek Empire. These were intended for the Jewish people for a specific period of time, namely up until the time of the coming of the Messiah, of Christ, and the coming of the kingdom of God, and the opening of the doors of the kingdom of God. And so that's really important to understand. Now, a verse like Romans chapter 1, if you read the story of the Old Testament, you go into the New Testament, you understand the story of Jesus, you understand the story of Jesus's apostles, you'll understand that Romans chapter 1 was intended for all people universally moving forward into history. So certain parts of the Bible are intended to be followed and applied today by all people. Other parts of the Bible, namely, much of the Old Testament, which is talking about God's specifics to the Israelites, they're not intended to be applied or followed or regulated amongst all people for all time. So it's just a matter of context. We read the Bible. If you understand the context, you understand where certain things fit, who is required to follow certain laws. And what we find out is that the laws that people reference about the shellfish and the materials, those were laws given to people in the past, and they no longer apply today. So we've answered the criticism. There is not an inconsistency with Christians wanting to apply a command that's found in the New Testament, like in Romans chapter 1, and not condemning those who eat shellfish. There's no inconsistency. It's just a matter of context and to whom certain laws apply. These people who want to criticize Christians for not following Israelite laws, it's kind of like criticizing an American for following all the laws of the United States, but then not following the laws of China. It's like, what kind of criticism is that, right? The American is bound by the American laws, the laws of the USA. They're not bound by the laws of China. They don't have to follow those. They don't have to teach those to their children, and they don't have to teach those to other Americans to have them be law-abiding citizens, right? But that's the kind of illusory suggestion that people who are making this criticism are putting forth. So you probably will encounter this argument somewhere along the line if you're a Christian. And I think this is the best way to answer it. Context. Just read the Bible appropriately and you'll figure out the solution. Don't allow yourself to be ignorant of the Bible and to get the wool pulled over your eyes on this one. And also, if you're a critic, don't make this argument, because anyone who's actually somewhat well-versed in the scriptures is going to turn this over on you, and you're going to look dumb. You're going to look uneducated, because Only a person who doesn't understand the Bible makes a criticism like this. So I think that's all that I have to say on this. I just felt like I've heard this so many times, and I see it so many times that it's like I should make something on this, at least just a basic answer to this criticism. So thanks for paying attention. Let me know down in the description if you have any questions. Maybe you've heard some like ways that this argument has been like improved on by critics to make it more tricky. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts and if you've ever heard this, and or if you're a critic, and you have you think my explanation isn't very good, let me hear that as well. So, all right, you guys take care. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll talk about, I think we're on 1 Samuel chapter 10, our 5-minute study. So Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow. All right, bye.